Alright, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun Reviews, back to talk more X-Men comic books. And today we're talking about Powers of X, number 5, the penultimate issue of Powers of 10, not Powers of X, sorry. So full spoilers if you have not read this book yet, because there's some shit going on. And there's some stuff I found, for anybody who really wants to have things spoiled. Also I picked up the... to go along with my shirt, I guess. The Gambit character over the decades version. I really love Gambit. So we got that one in there too. So, holy crap. Okay, so more information in this book. So we've all been talking, like anybody that's been making these reviews, everybody's been talking about what's going on, how we feel like we're not really seeing what we think we're seeing, that they're trying to pull the wool put the wool over our eyes, a little misdirection, kind of a little bit of a magic trick going on where things just aren't what they seem. And right from the very get-go, Professor X says it, like right there. They will think we are doing one thing, but the truth is we are doing something altogether different. So what does that mean? Because a lot of people are, saying that this isn't even Charles underneath that helmet, and that I've heard the idea that it was Cassandra Nova. I really hope not, because what they did with her last storyline in X-Men Red kind of feels like, I don't know. I mean, with the way that this story is set up, it just feels like Cassandra Nova shouldn't be the person if it's not Charles. And again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but why isn't anybody, okay, Charles Xavier was dead. Okay, killed by Cyclops as the Phoenix. And suddenly in Astonishing X-Men number 1, which is over my head, the poster for Astonishing X-Men number 1, it's revealed that the Shadow King had Charles escaped to the astral plane where Shadow King and him have been playing this battle, and eventually the X-Men come into the Shadow King's world on the astral plane, and spoilers for Astonishing X-Men, okay? Xavier, or as he's now calling himself, X, okay? That this is Charles, but it's different. It's X-Men. Confusing things are always going to happen. So this version of Charles, called X, takes over Phantom X's body. And then by the end of Astonishing X-Men, the first series of this new run that was just a little while ago ended, he goes off to do who knows what. We don't know. And then everything in the X-Men universe happens with the Age of X-Men debacle, and then now we're at this. And here's Xavier walking around with this helmet on his head, and people saying that it's not him. But what I'm saying is, why isn't anybody still talking about that it's X? This new Charles Xavier has different ideas. And with the way that the story is structured, how do we know that this isn't all just part of that same plan? Now, I'm not saying that it couldn't be Cassandra Nova, and it couldn't be all sorts of different things that we could see, but sometimes I just feel like we look a little too hard. I don't know. I'm probably wrong, but I'm just trying to leave the door open that it's still Chuck. Because with the way that some of the things that happen in this story just keeps making me think, how is this not Charles Xavier? He sure does, when we go back to X-Men Year 1, right, in Dallas, Texas, it's in here. Sure seems like old Charles Xavier. Also, speaking of this versus Age of X-Men, why didn't they just cancel the X-Men books for a minute and just give us this? Because this feels like what Age of X-Men should have been, where Nate Gray changes reality and we get this maybe, instead of that, which was one of the weirdest X-Men events that felt like a lot of nothing. The Cyclops Blob romance that we always wanted, that kind of thing. But anyway, getting into the book proper. So after we see that what Professor X says, Also, I love the end credit in this too. We see that Forge, who has been absent and noticeably, I guess not noticeably so, because as soon as he showed up, though, I was like, oh, that makes all the sense in the world. Is that he's the one that's helping Xavier build all these different Cerebros. He's the one who brought it to Forge about making it, copy and the minds and the beings, basically the soul of every mutant on the planet. And Forge lays out all the things that we talk about, like how would this work, all the different problems that you could have with it, even the micro and the macro, right? So it's like, first there's also the should you, and just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Like Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, right? That there's two problems, right? That there's a lot of mutants out there, it's growing every year, and then there's the redundancy. So in the micro, you're talking about a database of all mutant minds that's going to have to account for updated versions of each mind. For example, here's the important part. For example, the difference between who you were last year and who you are this year. Great fucking point. Because just these updated minds would need to be like the current version. Like, you don't want to go back to necessarily who you were. Like, I wouldn't want to go back to who I was in 2017, let me tell you. So then they have the macro, which is you're going to need duplicate versions of the entire system because you can't afford to ever lose the data. So he needs one backup. But Charles says, I'll take 5. Yeah, 5. Anyway, still learning perspective here. And so he's like, 1 main unit, 3 backups, and an additional one for unforeseen complications. So, 11th hour kind of situation where things are really dire, they can pull that out of their back pocket. Also, they talk about the storage and the power and how you couldn't get that on this planet. And this is where Charles again says, well, we got it. It's a Shi'ar ship hovering over, Earth right now. So this goes all the way back to when he first, met the Shi'ar people who powered Cerebro in the first place, or, helped with that. And whether or not Forge is going to build it, which he does. So we get into this whole thing about Cerebro and how Forge's technology, and we go into the copying thing again about backups. But there's note, as previously stated, while there's been no experimentation regarding what happens when you combine a mutant mind with a husk that is not their own, it is believed that unless a mutant has some primary or secondary ability to overcome, the potential damage such as a mismatch would cause it's likely to be harmful and possibly fatal. Another note, it is possible for a telepathic operator to replace their own mind with the previous legacy version. But doing so is incredibly difficult and would most likely require a skilled and experienced operator. Third note, Charles Xavier has done this twice. Okay, so this would kind of put in the idea that Cassandra Nova could be in his brain, and that, or somebody else could be in Charles's brain. Maybe the Shadow King. Nobody's even thought about that. But again, I just feel like those stories, those characters were just recently used. But since we're doing a reboot, I guess if we got them, they ended up being the big bad. I guess it kind of makes sense, but I really still hope it's not. But but they are definitely planting the seeds that this isn't Chuck, or it's possibly that, maybe it was at one time. I don't know, and now it isn't. But then we get into the whole Emma Frost thing. And this is really interesting because I just, after finishing making those Phoenix X-Men animated series Phoenix videos, and they bring up the Hellfire Club. And I'm not a fan of the Hellfire Club. I hate those guys. Now, I think that's what works. They're so good at being bad. That's why they're great. I hate them. I hate them. And I hate Sebastian Shaw most of all, which is who they bring in on this. But the first part of this whole thing is getting Emma to understand what's going on. Because this is before they even have the drugs done and all this stuff. It's basically just getting her, being able to explain to her what's going on. Because she thinks they're way ahead of themselves. But Magneto tells her, we're woefully behind because what's going on. And after they tell her everything, and they bust out one of the plants, let us show you what we're talking about, they take her to Krakoa. Which, immediately, she's like, one more time then, for the children. All right, I'm in. Tell me what you need. I really love that shot too. I mean, it's a shot, almost like a movie, but again, the art in this is so good. I didn't know if it was going to be good actually when this book started. So they talk about the deal to get Emma Frost in. She's going to be the distributor for 50 years, non-compete for the drug. And they also bring up the council, that is going to be maybe temporary thing until they figure things out. But they offer her 2 seats. I also like how what Magneto says, and what begins as a fire will grow to an inferno. Maybe a little wink there. Okay, but why 2 seats? We need you to bring Sebastian Shaw back into the Hellfire, which she doesn't like the idea of. But they need 2 faces, right? The legit and the unlegit. So they want to use Emma as the face of the company, the pretty face, the one who can get things done with her mind, telepathy and all that stuff, the way she can influence things. The consummate politician who partners with countries with which we have official relationships. And for Sebastian Shaw, who, God, I hate him. They need a black king to run the black book operations into countries who reject our sovereignty. Get the drugs in, get the mutants out. So this part of the plan really, okay, I hope that this is what they're talking about at the beginning of this when he says we're showing you one thing, doing another. Because getting in bed with the Hellfire Club and bringing Sebastian Shaw in, who could give a fuck about mutant, equality and rights and a new island? He just wants everything for himself. Like some of these other villains. But some of these villains, are only villains because they are oppressed as well, and this is their way of acting out. And so given the new opportunity to be in a special place, some of these villains won't be villains anymore, potentially. I think like Logan said in House of X number 5, some people are beyond saving, and I believe that's true. But Emma says she needs 3 seats to the council. Also, really interesting is this little thing here. I know this has nothing to do with House of X, but alas, Venom Island by Danny Cates and Mark Bagley. I like the Danny Cates part. Donnie Cates, sorry, not Danny. I'm not so sure about Mark Bagley. I'm not a big fan of his art. Never have been. In fact, when I thought about going back and buying Lethal Protector again, like the original, I was like, man, I did not like it when he took over Amazing Spider-Man. But we don't want to get off track. So they have this list, right? This is an interesting thing, okay? This list of people on the council. So there's autumn, winter, spring, summer, and Krakoa. Krakoa is easy. It's Cypher and Krakoa. But then, okay, you look at this black stuff, right? And apparently, what somebody figured out is that, and I'm going to put it up here on a website, a different website. That is not the controller I need. Okay, so he figured out that if you copy and paste it, you can see who's under everything. So major spoilers, right? So if you don't want to know what I'm about to say about this because it's blacked out in here, don't watch any further. So we got the first 2 spots that for Autumn, which is Professor X and Magneto, but we also are adding Apocalypse to that. Winter is Mr. Sinister, Exodus, and what is supposedly blacked out, but I guess you're supposed to be able to see that the last one says Mystique. Then for Spring, which is just shows you Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost, underneath that is the Red Queen, Kate Pryde. So, Kitty is going to be like a part of that. She's going to be the Red Queen. Like, what? And then Summer, which is completely blacked out of the council members, consists of Storm, Marvel Girl, and Nightcrawler. Which, for as far as like even-tempered X-Men go, I guess those would be pretty good choices. So that's the council. And then we get the year 10 thing about the summoning, where Charles sends the message out to all mutants, including the villains. If you can see them all there. Even Omega Red, who I'm glad has made a kind of a heroic turn lately. But then he goes to see, of all people, which I completely didn't even consider, seriously I didn't, was Namor. He goes to Namor. Forgot fucking Namor's a mutant. Because he's just such an asshole, I always forget about him. But he comes to give him, hey, we're giving you the welcome too. And they want him back in the fold. He says, it's kind of you to ask, but if I'm comprehending the real reason you're doing this, it's because you find that you are not them, and that they will never accept you or love you, not because you don't deserve it, but because they envy you. They hate your superiority, and they always will. It's good that you finally figured this out, but let me ask you, do I strike you as someone who's just now realized how much better I am than everyone else? That is the quintessential line that sums up Namor pretty much right away. That sums up Namor in a fucking nutshell. And do you actually think I believe that you feel that way too? Go away, little man, and don't come back until you really mean it. Fucking Namor, he's an asshole, but he's got a point. And we're supposed to believe that Namor doesn't think that they mean it. Like that he's not fooling Namor. Maybe because he's been around for a while. So then we get into the Phalanx thing. Again, the thing that's just really hard for me to kind of figure out what's going on is that they're taking things over, and it looks like they're siding with the machines, and that they're going to be, it's a whole fucking thing. I am still having a hard time with this one. So anybody in the comment section want to clue me into all this, because there's a lot of words. And I understand what they're saying, but I'm not seeing the big picture other than they're going to be wiping everything out. But they discuss the types of societies universally, right? And so they talk about Titan, strongholds, and dominions, and each one being bigger, like 10 million, 100 million, and then dominions like an undefined number of stacked up like universes basically that create a singularity. Then there's a cluster, and that a dominion is a collective of 10 or more titans acting in unison to control a particular sector of space in both area and epochs of time. And while the minimum number of titans needed to compose a dominion is 10, the average number of titans in a dominion is much higher than that. For example, the local dominion controlling the sector including Earth space is a collective numbering 112 titans. It's worth noting that in terms of intellect and power, a dominion is not colloquially, well, I know how to say that word, colloquially, godlike, but categorically godlike and indistinguishable from any and all mythic or religious comparisons. Note, beyond universal abstracts under which dominions are seen as naturally occurring, the only primal threats that a dominion fears are the World Eater Galactus and the single universal manifestation of life, the Phoenix. So, jeez Louise. They said this one isn't marked in red to be important. Well, it seems pretty important to me. And then the very last line is, when you see me again, understand what that means. Namor. So that could go into conjunction with what he said at the beginning, right? Maybe that's something that they said to each other. Like, this is Professor X saying to Namor, they will think we are doing one thing, but the truth is we're doing something altogether different. And then Namor says, when you see me again, understand what that means. So, woo, 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 holy moly, more big, great stuff from Powers of 10 and Jonathan Hickman. Just keep nailing it. I had a smile on my face as soon as I cracked open this book. And I have not been this excited to read a book. They read comics since I restarted reading like 4 years ago. So anyway, if you like this video, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Let me know in the comments what you guys think is going on here. Pretty much any kind of theories at this point would be would be taken. We're going to be back next week with House of X number 6. And we might have some more reviews for comics coming up in the near future. And you can kind of count on comic reviews being the only thing that I do right now, because I am not really up to making a lot of content right now. So anyway, have a great day, and we will see you on the next video. Bye.